All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Because Football Podcast. This is your host, Coach Andrew. And today, our special guest is Jon Boafo, originally of Ghana, now of Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. Jon, thank you so much for joining us.
Andrew, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Certainly. And I know we met personally a couple weeks ago. I was very fortunate during my visit to Cote d'Ivoire to visit your club, the Ivoire Academies. Training grounds and playing grounds, and got to see some of the Abidjan Academy Cup that was going on. It was a collection of some of the top under 18, under 19 academy clubs within the country, and that was a great opportunity for me to see the level of players there and the style of play. So before we get into that and your work with the club, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I guess the first thing that I love to ask is, what's your earliest memory of football?
That's a really good question. I actually have this memory is quite vivid. So I remember the 1994 World Cup and the final Brazil versus Italy. And I remember that we had some family friends that had come to visit us from Kenya. We had just moved to France from Kenya 2 years ago, 2 years prior to that, sorry. And I remember everyone in the room supporting Brazil, and I was the only one in that group that was supporting Italy. And I
Oh,
remember, I remember Roberto Baggio, that missed penalty, and I remember literally being on the floor crying, not even knowing why I was crying, because
mm-hmm.
I had supported the team just from the beginning of the World Cup, but it was kind of random. I liked the white jerseys that they were wearing. I liked also not supporting the same team as the rest of my family and being really, really
Very
sad and
oppositional,
heartbroken.
right?
Yeah, very oppositional, and being really like heartbroken at the fact that Italy, my newfound and beloved team, had lost in the final of the World Cup against Brazil.
Yeah, those are those heartbreaks. I can think of a couple memories for me personally, like Germany in 2006 when they hosted. I was supporting them. They lost to Italy in the semifinals. I remember the same type of heartbreak and feeling. It's like those lows of football that tend to stick with us. And so after that World Cup, as we kind of continue forward, could you give us a little view of like kind of how football was part of your life that led up to this point where now you're involved in the Ivoire Academy?
Yeah, so football was always kind of a part of my life. For a little bit of background, I was born in Ghana, but my dad was a diplomat, so we moved quite a bit. Like I mentioned earlier, we lived in the States, moved back to France
Mm-hmm.
and Ghana, and then ended up here in Cote d'Ivoire. But from some of my youngest memories was my dad playing football with, especially my oldest brother, who was probably the most talented out of all three of the boys in football, and seeing both of my older brothers playing in clubs. I also wanted to be inspired and also follow in their footsteps and play. So we ended up all three playing in the same team. And funny enough, when my oldest brother graduated, they made my other brother captain. And then when he graduated, I ended up being the captain. So those are my fondest memories. My level peaked at probably 17, and then it's all been downhill since then. But love being involved in football, and not as the best of players, but throughout the years, you get to understand football as a business,
Mm.
not only the entertaining side, but everything that has to do with players, how to improve players, how to move on players, how to help them also with some of the challenges that they face, especially on the African continent, with some of the pressures that they get from their families
Mm.
as well.
Yeah, so for a lot of people, they get hand-me-downs of clothes from their older siblings. You got the captain's armband handed down through each successive brother. So I'd love to hear that. You mentioned kind of
Exactly.
like, yeah, you mentioned kind of getting like a sense of like the business side of
Yeah.
football, right? And I know you had a strong background yourself within marketing, and so obviously you were more in a corporate world there, and so what do you think was one of those initial insights for you of like, hey, like I get a sense of maybe how this football business might work, and what was your kind of initial interest to get involved in the game? Because it's of the many people I talk to, obviously it's a passion, it's a global sport. It can be at the top levels, it can be very profitable. We see the superstar status that, and the contracts that the Messis and Ronaldos and those top level players are getting. But throughout the world, there's such ranges within that, and football really is a risky business, I would say, in so many aspects compared to some others that we might see. So what was kind of your initial like pull and draw to get involved in that side of the game?
So, funny enough, from a young age, the two things that I wanted to do was either become an investment banker or a football agent. Don't ask me why, but it was just one of those things that stuck in my head. And so I went to study. When I went to study at the University of Georgia, I ended up studying risk management and insurance, thinking, okay, I'm just going to go and work in an investment bank. And then when I started working, and then I eventually moved to Ghana, I got basically thrown in the deep end in the sports world. At the time, I was trying to qualify for the Olympics, the Rio Olympics as a rower.
Right.
So I'm the first Ghanaian rower to represent the country. And I met people here and there, and through that network, I landed a job working at Right to Dream Academy in Ghana. Right to Dream is one of the best football academies in Africa and probably around the world. And in my role as head of operations there, I was able to see the business side of football, because as a fan, especially as a fan of PSG, you kind of idealize the world of football. But once you're in there, you see what's happening, the deals
Mm-hmm.
that happen, etc. You do realize that it's a world which is set apart. It's a world which is based really on a lot of competence, but a lot of who you know as well, because deals get done with the people that you know, and deals get done with the people that you also appreciate. So it's a world which is kind of hard to get into, and one would even say that it's opaque at certain times. But I encourage people who are interested in getting into the world of football and the world of also sports management in general to try to crack the egg and try to get into the business.
And so you said your role was as like head of operations. I don't think on the podcast so far we've had someone in that type of role. Could you talk about maybe what your responsibilities and like kind of what your impact was to the academy within that operations role?
Yeah, so as a head of operations of Right to Dream, I was what you'd call kind of like the glue between all the various departments. So at Right to Dream, like at Ivoire Academie, there's a school, like a full-time school that all the student athletes that are there
Okay.
go to. There's also the football side, and at Right to Dream, there's the particularity of having what they call the character development program. So basically ensuring that all the various departments would communicate effectively. And then within my role as well as head of operations, I also helped with some of the operations, like day-to-day operations. So supervising the kitchen. We had about 8 staff within the kitchen, ensuring that we had the best chef. So when I came in, one of the things that we worked on was getting a chef that we got who had worked for about 13 years in South Africa at some of the best hotels, and was also at the time working at one of the best hotels in Ghana. So he had the experience of cooking for a lot of people with the pressure that comes with it. And he also understood the importance of giving healthy and great meals so that our players are able to also perform on the pitch. So those are basically some of the things that I was able to do within that role. And yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a learning school as well, because at the time, Right to Dream had been close to 20 years in operation, and things were accelerating. During my time there is when the Right to Dream group also acquired FC Nordsjælland, which is a first division team
Right.
in Denmark, and being part of that project and some other projects was probably some of the highlights of my career so far. I really learned it was during that time there that I really learned how to basically the business side of football in general.
Fascinating. And for many who don't know, I encourage you to research Right to Dream Academy. It's, Academy is not only putting players at a European level, but also, for my connection, obviously, to the United States, sending a lot of players to top prep schools, high schools, private schools here in the States, and then on to the university level. And many guys ending up in MLS, getting drafted or being signed by MLS clubs. So you really see the kind of the one of the two things you mentioned there that I wanted to bring up was obviously the educational piece. But before, I'd like to talk about like that nutrition side, because for me, from getting access and starting to learn more about African football, like as a whole, and depending on where you are, obviously Africa being a massive continent, 50 plus countries, you can't just make one blanket statement. However, for many kids that are coming from lower class families, let's say, even in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, the right nutrition is massive, right? And it's something that's become much more important in football here in the States, in Europe, around the world in the last 15 years or so, is that emphasis on nutrition, and like what to eat and what not. We have the privilege in the United States of, if for many families, like, you have access to the right types of food and nutrition. So could you talk about like the role that nutrition plays and how pivotal it can be and kind of make or break for players in their careers, specifically within your context?
Yes, certainly. I mean, food in general on the African continent is something that's really important, because certain people, like you mentioned earlier, don't have access to the best kinds of food, or only have access to a certain kind of food. So there's a lot of emotions which are tied in with food. But one of our reflections was we need to ensure that their adaptation when they go to the States or they go to Europe can be as seamless as possible. To ensure that when they become a professional, or if they become a student athlete at the high school level, or even at the college level, even if they end up being in the MLS, the kinds of food that they're able to eat is not foreign to them. So that's one of the reasons why we ended up bringing in the chef, because we basically want to do everything to ensure that they have basically all the right tools in their hand, so they can understand the importance of nutrition, understand the importance of being hydrated, and understand the importance of also being able to rest, because there's those fine margins which really make a huge difference when you're a professional player. So from a young age, you want to ensure that, they're able to eat don't enjoy eating a balanced diet and not only eating, for example, just rice and chicken or something. But yeah, so that was basically our reflection, and that's what led to us bringing in the chef.
Thanks for sharing that. I think it's so interesting, and I imagine it was easier said than done in some cases, because from people I've talked to, even at a professional level, it's a challenge to get players to eat what they should eat, what the nutritionists are recommending. And so especially when you're talking about adolescent boys and kind of their background, they kind of want to eat what they know. And I know, at least for a lot of kids that I coach in the US too, pregame meals is sometimes fast food or whatever mom and dad could just grab on the way to the game. And I remember something a couple of years ago, we had an early game. So I think I was already a little bit in a bad mood for having to get up so early. And we lost, pretty handily, probably our worst of the season, like the best team we played all season. So I was really annoyed and kind of frustrated. Now, bear in mind, this is 9-year-old girls, right? So I'm all frustrated after the game. And one of the dads shows up with like a bag of like burgers, basically, from like Burger King or McDonald's right after the game. And we're in a tournament. So this was supposed to be like the power food for the rest of the tournament. And I just remember, like, he offered one to me, and I was like, no, thank you. And I turned away, and I just, like, all the things going through my head, like the generosity of this dad to bring food for the whole team. yet it's this stuff. And I'm like, we just, anyway. So I know that can be a challenge itself. But very, very important approach to kind of prepare players, not only for what they're going to get on the field, but like culturally off the field as well, which can have such a massive impact on whether they succeed or not. And then the second thing you'd mentioned that I really want to get into too is education, right? So I know that with Right to Dream, with you mentioned there, I was not aware, but with Ivoire Academy, with JMG, with I imagine like Generation Foot, similar in Senegal, a lot of these bigger academies, and it's a model we've started to adopt in the United States. We have YSC Academy here in Philadelphia that is, residential school in addition to playing football. So why is that kind of necessary within kind of your context in Cote d'Ivoire, and what are some of the benefits that it gives you and advantages compared to some of the other academies out there that might only be offering football?
Yeah, so a lot of times the parents are keen on their kids potentially becoming professional footballers, but some parents also have the understanding that just because they're an academy doesn't mean that they'll automatically become a football player, a
Right.
professional football player. And just because they become a professional football player doesn't mean that they'll be able to get paid enough to be able to sustain them in the long term. There's only so many Mbappes and Neymars of the world who are making basically, most of the more money than most of the other professional football players. So it's important that they continue the education for a couple of reasons. The first thing is so they can also be able to be curious about the world. Certain players might become obsessed with history or become obsessed with math or things that will occupy the time if they do end up becoming a professional football off the field, because a lot of times they have a lot of time outside of training. So instead of just only playing on the PlayStation or doing other things, they can also continue and further their education. I know, for example, that Vincent Kompany ended up getting his master's degree even while he was playing, and I believe also Mata did the same. And there are other examples of a couple of players who were able to do that. So that's one thing, to be able to give that hunger of continuous learning, continuous improvement on and also off the field. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, you don't know what's going to happen. You might get an injury, something might not be able to work out, and being able to fall on the possibility of leaning on your education, something that's really important. I Right to Dream, for example, because the players spoke English, there's that possibility now of them going to some of the top high schools in the States, and then also going to some of the top colleges in the UK and in the States on full scholarships. So it just basically broadens the opportunities that you're able to have. I want to only produce football players. We also want to produce players that can also have an impact on their communities. And some of our players, for example, with a partnership that we have with a team that supports student athletes in France. A couple of our players last year, 3 of them exactly, went to France to continue their education after getting their high skill diploma. And that's something that we're trying to push on more and more, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to see not only football players coming out of the academy, but people who end up doing other things with their lives later on. There was one kid, for example, that was before my time here, who has now ended up being, he went all the way to, got his high school diploma, started playing professionally, and then that didn't work out. And then he's now become an entrepreneur. So he runs his own barbershop. I believe he was cutting the hair of the Guinea team, or one of the teams that's during the AFCON. So, that's another inspiring story for the kids, because we all want to become football players. I mean, 100%. Even I want to until I peaked at 17. But at the end of the day, there's only so many slots for professional football players. So use what you learned on and off the field in the environment like an Ivoire Academy to be able to improve your life and do something else.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, even in that example you gave, it, the boy did go pro for a short time, but it's such a tough world, you know. And like you could pick up an injury, and as I mentioned, there's just so many risky things involved. So I think, you know, I really love to see like the model that you have at Ivoire Academy and other similar ones where that educational component is key. Even if someone goes on and is very successful and has a stable career, then it's still like, well, you get 15 years, maybe 20 years, maybe a little more if you keep yourself in physical shape like Ronaldo. I don't think he's shown any sign of stopping, but it's always like there's going to be an after, right? And there's going to be a significant portion of your life that is the after. So I think that given that the educational piece is important. So you've kind of mentioned, yeah.
And sorry, and to add
Sure.
to your point, I think I mentioned this earlier. Sometimes there's some family pressure on the professional players. So if you look at the story of Adebayor, for example, or there are other stories like that where families putting on pressure, or if you also don't understand how to manage your money and you trust in certain people, and then eventually you get squandered. So, you know, being able to have that education not only in the classroom, but education about how to manage your finances, how to manage your career, all that stuff is really important because like you said, maybe it's a 20-year career and then, you know, you have another 40, 50 years to live. What are you going to do with that time?
Exactly. Yeah, you got to try to stretch that money to cover as far as you can. And you touch on the family pressures,
Sure.
which is something that for me coming from the United States, like maybe I can see a little bit of it, but I really have no idea what the average kid trying to make it, you know, especially in a let's say Cote d'Ivoire now hosting the AFCON tournament, the CAN tournament. You see the passion. They're just like crazy about football, right? And I know it's the case in much of Africa, and so obviously the dream of every child is to be, you know, now that the Sekou Fofanas, right, the Sangares, it was to be the Toures and the Drogbas. And so that's the goal and the dream. And obviously the family around that sees the financial side, sees the material upside to that. And in some cases, that's kind of like the best option to change their lives. So could you talk about like, you know, we look in the United States with the kids that I coach and train, there are parental pressures as coaches, you know, sometimes it sours our experience, but for us, it's usually not, oh, little Johnny needs to go pro. It's more of just things like little Johnny isn't getting as much playing time as he should, or why are you coaching like that? Or it gets more into like the granular things with a lot of parent complaints, and not as, and sure, maybe it's like, or the team needs to do better, but in the States it's more of a dream of going to college, playing in university. And then some people are just like, I'm happy to my kid just to love the game and enjoy it, and I'll support that. But so that's more of like our context. So could you share a little bit more, like maybe from the, obviously what the kid is feeling, the parental side, and obviously there's the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to those family situations. But could you share a little bit of like that side of things that the average person outside of Cote d'Ivoire, outside of West Africa, like just wouldn't really know about or understand?
So it really depends. At the beginning, and most times, if they come in, for example, say at the age of 12, the kids are just really just passionate about football. And they want to do all they want to do is just play football, know that they have a skill, that they have a talent, and they're usually better than most of the other players that they've played against in their area or in their neighborhood. So their thing is really, I want to be able to play football in a good environment, try to get as good as possible, and then see what the opportunities are. There's always that dream to be the next Sekou Fofana or Toure or Eboué or some of these other professional players. And that's usually the drive that they are from the kids' point of view. It's really when you get to a certain level, probably 16, 17, close to 18, where the real pressure starts to come. When they're younger, a lot of times, well, it depends on the parents' background, but if the parents' background is from more of the poorer side, a lot of times they're also quite relieved to have one less mouth to feed. They're just really excited that their kids will be able to be in a good environment where they'll be able to have fun, enjoy their football, improve their footballing skills and then be able to also go to school. So there's less so pressure at that age, but the older they get, the more difficult it ends up becoming. If a player, for example, plays for a youth national team, that's when some of the less so palatable people in the industry will start circling around, especially very talented players. What ends up happening sometimes is, and I'm sure this is something that also happens in Europe and in other contexts where, you know, regardless of the rules, they'll try to skirt the rules to try to ensure that the player signs at this or that club as well. So that's where the pressure comes. But I'm also conscious of the fact that it's a difficult situation also for your parents. Imagine you're not making that much money and someone comes and says, hey, listen, you're a 16, 17-year-old kid. We would like for him to leave the academy that he's in and then sign with our academy, and we'll give you, say, $10,000. You know, at the end of the day, it's money that they would have probably not seen very often in their life, and it's life-changing money for them at that scale. So that's what becomes a little bit odd, and it ends up putting pressure on the family sometimes to make decisions which are good for them potentially in the short term, but in the long run might also hamper the development of the kid, and then also the chances, especially if they're in an environment like an Ivoire Academy where we're very I was going to say mothering, but that's not the right word, where we're very conscious of taking care of the children and ensuring that we give them the best opportunities and the best settings to be able to succeed later down the line. So that's that at our age level. But, you know, as professionals, once you start making money, then things become, they become difficult. And this is something that's worldwide. I know that professional players that turn professional at 15, 16 in France, for example, and are making more money than their parents, then they become basically the head of the household, which is a burden, which is very difficult to put on at that age. And I don't know for you, but when I was 17, 18, even if I was in college already, I wasn't the smartest of kids. I remember when I was sent off to college, my dad gave me some $500, and it was more money than I had seen before in my whole life, at least on my bank account. And then I ended up getting to the States and buying like a Palm Pilot or something stupid like that, and using all the money and then having to get a job at the end of the day. So imagine that at $500, and if you're making $200,000 a year, $300,000, $500,000 at 15, 16, 18 or so. It's quite a lot of money. And nowadays, also with the pressure of social media and, you know, the DMs that they get, et cetera, it's really not an easy thing to become a professional player. So it's important to have an environment and a circle that is understanding and that are there for the long term, because you might be making money in your first contract and you think that's the most money you're going to be able to make, but if you put your head down, you keep working hard, it's on your second, third contract that you really be able to make significant amount of money and be able to really change the lives of your family as well. So that's really the advice that I've given to some young professional African players before, and I'd give it to any professional players. Just because you were the best under 16 player in the world doesn't mean that when you're 18 you're playing with men, that it's going to continue. So keep working hard and keep improving daily, and the financial rewards will come after that.
Yeah, exactly. You make a great point with like, it's great that you've made it to the point to get that first contract and you're getting a little taste of what it could be, but it's really about contract number 4, number 5. Like, do you have the ability to make it to that point, right? And that's where that is probably not as much to do with talent as it is to do with the mental side and how you're managing your personal life and those type of things that can really like keep you going forward. What would you say that Ivoire Academy, you know, the current club you're a part of, what advantage do you guys have? Or let's say you're competing for a really talented 12, 13-year-old to join the academy. Like, what do you try to present to the families as why they should go with you guys versus, one of the other clubs that is knocking on their door?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, we've been around for much longer than some of the other academies. So we've been around for 22 years. It was started in 2002. And then we've had some of the top players, including Gervinho, that have come through the academy. So
Okay.
that in of itself already shows you the kind of talent that's come through Ivoire Academy. So that's the first thing. And then also what really stands out compared to some other academies, because there are really a lot of academies in Cote d'Ivoire these days, is the settings that we have. We have a 40-acre 40-acre campus with 7 pitches, 1 pitch, which is a beach soccer pitch. We have the dorms that are there. We have the schools that are there. We also take care of our kids well. The ratio of students to teachers in our classrooms is quite low. So there's really this like tailor-made environment that really is there to ensure that the talent is be able to be maximized to the fullest. Yes, there's certain things that we need to be able to improve on, like anywhere, but the parents are pretty sure that they will be in the right environment compared to some of the other places where, yes, there's the pressure to perform and do your best that you can, but we are also in it to ensure that our kids, our student athletes are also good citizens and end up doing something with their life, be it as a professional footballer or as an entrepreneur or even an employee at the end of the day. So I'll give you an example. We have this one player who was with us all throughout the academy. Actually, there are 3 examples of that. And in the end, they played professional or they didn't. And we helped them also go back to school, get their coaching licenses, and they're now coaches as well, like junior coaches at the academy as well. So, we really care for the players, and if they go along with what we tell them to do, and if they play the game as it were, and do their best, there's always something positive that's going to come out of it on their side, and the parents are aware of that, and that's probably one of the reasons why they send us some of the top talents to our place.
And what would you say is like kind of the word gets thrown around a lot, like the DNA of an Ivoire Academy player, or that's the type of player you guys try to develop. I think for me, I definitely saw when I was watching your team, like very, very technical, really competitive, like that game you guys had against JMG, like just so physical. At one point, you guys had to walk. I think Raheem walked out on there and had to give everybody like a little heart to heart to calm down. Like the passion was flying. It was amazing to see. But what would you guys say is kind of like the type of player you're looking for to develop, that where it's like, hey, if you see him, it's like that's an Ivoire Academy kid?
Yeah, like you mentioned, they need to be technically sound. They also need to be able to show the passion. And then there's also a sense of arrogance that, yes, I can be the best player in the academy. I can be the best player in Cote d'Ivoire. That's something that we're also looking for. And then we also are confident that in the time that they spend with us, we'll be able to improve them. So a lot of the players come in at the age of, between 10 to 12. And they really start with what we call in French, la gamme. I don't know what it is in English, but basically on a daily basis, when they usually train twice a day. It's basic things like juggling with your left foot, juggling with your right foot, juggling on your head, juggling with your thighs, juggling with your shoulders, etc. And it gets to a level where they should be able to do that quite easily and be able to, go back and forth. And that's when the serious things start to happen, because we know that they have the technical base to be able to express themselves on the field. So there's the technical ability. That's the key thing. Like I said earlier, the passion, and then also that kind of arrogance.
So I like that term you use, like the arrogance piece, right? Because it's something that is kind of innate in the personality of a player. And I think that when you talk about all the challenges that come your way to make it to a professional level, like you have to have that self-belief. Is there a way you think to instill more of that? Like part of, I think, is the role of a coach is to kind of like believe in your players, right? And have them trust you and know that you have their back, right? And that goes as a coach, that goes as director of a club, right? And yes, there's going to be accountability and you have to perform because it is that competitive environment, but knowing that the kid really, can trust, like, do you think it's possible to create some of that arrogance, as you said, some of that self-belief, as I might use a term, like, or is that kind of just fixed within the individual? They're born with it, and that's just their kind of gift or curse to carry through life.
I think that's something that you can instill it into some of the players, but the ones who are the best have it naturally. And I think it's from the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, they know that in the neighborhood, they're probably the best player in the area, that they're the best player, the teams that they're playing in, they're the best player, and everyone else recognizes it. So from a younger age, they know that they are, they're ahead of the rest of the players. But then what ends up happening is you might be the best player in this specific neighborhood. And then when you come to the academy, you're grouping all the best players.
Mm-hmm.
So the head level is higher. So they need to ensure that they keep that self-belief and they keep working hard as well. Because at the end of the day, it's really about how hard you work as well. The talent part is something, but you look at certain players, like if I were to mention a James Milner, I'm sure he's
Mm-hmm.
a talented player, but you can see that his whole life has been around football.
Yeah.
The way that he takes care of himself, the way that he works hard in all the training sessions, which has led to him playing in the Premier League for such a long time. So I'd rather have a player like that I know that on a daily basis, they know that, the tables have been reset and today I need to work as hard as I can,
Mm-hmm.
than someone who thinks and knows that they're talented. And so they kind of drop off. At the end of the day, you need to be able to work hard and on the long term. And that's really the only way that you can have any kind of success, be it on the field or off the field, is constant work, constant hard work,
Mm-hmm.
and a certain level of also conscientiousness as well. I've seen certain players that are almost obsessive from the age of 10, 11. And, they'll get upset if things don't work and they'll keep working harder, work harder and working harder. And you kind of have that eye and say, okay, whatever happens, this player will be able to make it at some kind of professional level. It might not be at a Barcelona level or a Real Madrid level, but you know that they'll work as hard as they can to be able to make it through, barring, some kind of injury or something
Sure.
bad happened to them.
Yeah.
You know that they'll be able to make it at the end of the day. So, to answer your question, but to go back to your point, it's something that can be instilled, but I think it's also something that is ingrained. They need to be able to push themselves from like they need to have that self-belief to push
Mm-hmm.
themselves, because at the beginning it might come from their coaches, it might come from their parents, but they need to also interiorize this and
Exactly.
and decide to push themselves. I was listening to this podcast the other day by Thierry Henry that was saying that at the beginning of his career, or not at the beginning of his career, but when he started playing football, he was doing it to please his father. And and his father was quite harsh, so he would work hard to please his father. And then it got to a point where he basically took it upon himself to continue to push himself. And it wasn't only about his father, but it was about what is the best version of Thierry Henry as a footballer can I be.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically kind of what I would say would be the evolution of this self-belief or the arrogance, like I used before.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, again, as a coach, we can do that, but once that kid leaves you and he's in another environment, he's in another team, maybe he's with a coach who doesn't maybe give that same level of care and attention, like, is that just going to fall off, or is it going to, and I think it is a personal thing, and each individual is going to be different. What would you say then if
Yeah.
we, yep.
Sorry. And to add to that, as a coach, I mean, I'm not a coach, but as a coach, you also need to understand the kid, because there's certain kids that need a pat on the back, but certain kids that actually respond to the contrary of that. It's when you
Yeah,
shout at them that they're like, okay, I need to step up. So you need to be able to understand them, to know, okay, this guy needs a pat on the back. This one needs to, to be shout at, or to be talked to a bit more harsher, or something. And then there's also anything that's in between. But basically, you can't speak to all 11 or 25 of your players the same way, because that's not, you need to be able to tailor make
agree.
and individualize your approach to each of the players.
Agree. I think that's a big piece of whether it's coaching or then you even more in a director role of like understanding each individual when you're scouting them originally, seeing if they're a good fit, then being able to assess if they're, still kind of at the level they need to be a part of the academy going forward. I think it's knowing the individual, and yeah, you can't just kind of paint it all with the same brush, so to speak. It has to be individualized. If we look at, we're talking about individuals, but I'm curious of getting a little bit more into kind of the big picture within Ivorian football. Like my perception after spending just a very brief week there, so knowing pretty much nothing and also being exposed to just certain areas. Obviously, there's a passion for the game. The nature of just being with the ball constantly leads to emphasis on technique, right? And I've seen that a lot through the like your side and those youth games. But what would you say are some of the challenges that Ivorian football has been facing now, or even in the few years since you've been involved with the academy? Like, what are those challenges or kind of hurdles that need to be kind of stepped over to get to the next level again? Because we can look and look at on paper, this is a solid Ivorian team right now in the AFCON. We know the performance has not been there, but on paper, you could say it's still definitely a top 10 squad as far as the clubs, the leagues are playing in within Europe. But it's still not quite the golden generation of the Toure brothers or Drogba's generation. So what do you think are some of those challenges or things that need to be improved to kind of get Cote d'Ivoire back into the World Cup stage and one of those elite teams in the world that we've known they have been in the past?
I would say you probably want to rely on a model which is more similar to the Senegalese model. So recently, the Senegalese teams have been killing it at the under 17 level, or the under 20 level, and then also winning the AFCON at the senior level at the last edition. You want to basically promote and encourage private initiatives of football academies and ensure that they have also opportunities and pathways for the players that they'll be able to produce into the national team. And so that's something that probably Cote d'Ivoire needs to be able to improve on. There's a lot of football academies in Cote d'Ivoire. Like you mentioned, some of the other ones like GMG, Ivoire Academie would be there as well, Abidjan City, etc. And those are some of the more professional ones. But there are also, I would say, as an estimate, hundreds of other ones which are that are in neighborhoods that are not well known, etc. But why not rely on the bigger structures and ensure that there's a collaboration between the federation and then some of these bigger structures to ensure that there's a pipeline of talent that's there that can integrate the youth national teams and then also the first teams. Because what ends up happening is if at the under 17 level they're able to participate in an AFCON or even an international competition like the World Cup, etc., it gives them more opportunities to do other things outside, to be able to sign a professional contract and to be in the best kinds of environments that's going to help them develop as a team. And then eventually that's going to reflect on the first team. So I would say, collaborating with football academies as a federation would certainly be a really good way to improving things, because if the federation collaborated more with us and understood what our goals are, and we understood also what their goals were, there would be some kind of symbiotic partnership, which would help the national team move forward as well. So that's the main thing I would say. Really copying or getting inspired from the Senegalese model to help things improve.
So it sounds like then currently there just might not be a lot of symbiosis or kind of shared vision, I guess, between the FA and the clubs that kind of each have their own kind of goals they're trying to achieve, but separately. And it sounds like too on the club side with all the academies might be a case of so many academies operating that it is kind of like spreading that talent pool wider rather than maybe concentrating it a bit. And I think there's arguments for both. I am a proponent of really building up, if you want to build better elite players, well, then you have to improve the lower level players, because then when you're, that lower level is stronger, then you going towards the middle, and then the elite, like it all pushes up. I know that there are other places that believe more in an approach of like, hey, we're going to take the 25 best 14-year-olds, or we're going to, like a Clairefontaine type of approach in France, which obviously has had its merits. But I know that the United States had a similar system in the 90s and 2000s with more, let's say, disputable success. So I'm not sure where I fall on that, but it sounds like right now everything is just really kind of spread out without having a particular, it's not a pyramid going to one point. It's maybe a lot of different type of systems going in their own directions.
Yeah, certainly. And to add to that point, the Federation does a really, really good job with the leagues that they organize. So Ivoire Academie's first team currently plays in the third division. There are 40 teams in the third division, split into 4 groups, and the first of each of the groups then gets promoted to the second division, and then 4 from the second division then get demoted as well. And so that works really well. But I think something that would really help would be organizing really youth leagues. If you're thinking about even at the age of 14 to 16, that would be helpful, because then we would be able to have the best 14 to 16-year-olds being able to compete against each other at a national level, and then also get to know what the other talent is around, and be able to sort it out. And it's something that only the Federation really can do. The private initiatives can do that once in a while, similar to the tournament that you were able to come to visit. But at that level, it demands the resources and the kind of planning that only a federation is able to put in place.
Okay, so you mentioned like a youth league of, let's say, the top U16, and that's something I heard as well, even from the FA too. I spoke with the technical director, Mr. Batelli, and he mentioned that as probably one of his top, definitely in the top 5 of measures that he'd like to see as well. Another thing he mentioned is facilities, right? And so with Ivoire Academy, I was blown away. Like, you guys definitely have your own little footballing world back there. You're driving through the grounds, and a field just pops up on one side of the road, and there's a couple more, and we won't even get into the old vintage planes that are scattered around, like it's like it's Jurassic Park or something like that, which is definitely something we gotta exactly like Lost, so we gotta talk about for sure. It's very unique, and everybody will be seeing that on the videos I put out. But so another thing that was mentioned, and I heard a lot of different people talk about, was facilities, the quality of facilities. Now, you guys have to be in a really kind of, I would imagine, I feel like just in a week I saw a decent array between you guys, between FC San Pedro as well, like really beautiful facilities. And then I'm talking to people, and it's like, and there are a lot of investment made in the tournament facilities and the stadiums for AFCON, and they look beautiful. And it's a question of, all right, what happens after? What impact do they have after? And maybe in Abidjan, it's one story, being a more densely populated area, but especially in your more remote places like your Korhogos and Boakes, like what kind of impact are they going to have on the game at a regional level there? But what would you say, like obviously you guys have an advantage of beautiful grass pitches, is spectacular. And then you have the beach soccer as well. Like, so you guys are obviously in a great position, but in general, do you see facilities as something that has been holding Ivorian football back, or do you see it as a matter of just, hey, this actually could be, helping to shape these really technical type of players? Like, where do you see on the whole, like, let's say facilities tied in with the street football versus just all those many academies and the resources that they have?
Yeah, so funny enough, having these pitches require a lot of resources in terms of building the pitches and then also the maintenance of the pitches. So I think as it stands, the most important is to be able to have places for these kids to be able to train from a young age. Having, even if it's just like a dirt pitch, and it's there that they'll improve their first touches. It's there that they'll really be able to build on some of the technical abilities that they'll be able to show at a professional level, or even at the academy level. If you look at certain places, like Brazil, or even other places within Africa, a lot of times they don't tend to play on proper pitches until later on. And then if you're looking at the case of Brazil, they even tend to play in futsal. So
Right.
close control, better skills, etc. So I don't think that it's much of an issue right now, because there's the passion. So some of these kids, like they'll just take a ball and be kicking around, even if it's a dirt pitch. In Abidjan, one of the things that happens today, being a Sunday, you see it quite a lot. They'll like basically unofficially close off the road and start playing in the middle of the road. They'll put a couple posts, and then if a car comes, they'll move the posts, and then they'll put them back and then start playing. But some of these side roads, so that really helps with them improving and becoming better players. But at an academy level, and then at a higher level as well, you definitely need to have some good training pitches, because for example, in the third division, we have gone and traveled to some other parts of the city, not of the city, sort of the country, to be able to play other teams. And some of the pitches that we had to play on were just terrible pitches that were built some time ago, and then the maintenance wasn't done, and they're just really bad, in a really bad state. And but like I said, the most difficult thing is always maintenance and the cost that's associated with maintenance. And that's my primary worry. And that's one of the things that will always make a place like Ivoire Academie or FC San Pedro, like you mentioned earlier, stand out compared to some of the other smaller academies.
Yeah, I think the distinction you make is important, and this is something that's been going on in my head of, exactly like you said. Like, we look at Brazil, right? Bar none, the greatest exporter of footballing talent ever. And like, they play futsal a lot until younger ages. And then even when, so like, it's a country that has its own economic challenges and big ranges. So you have the best of the best that you can possibly, that money can possibly buy. And then you also have, the dirt pitches or sand or gravel. And so it's like, I think to your point of at what level does it become kind of a net negative on the ability? And I would agree that once you're getting to those academy, you're 15-year-old plus. One thing I mentioned with the technical directors, he's saying, you have a lot of kids who don't play on a regular 11-a-side pitch till they're like 18, 19, when they're ready to make a professional debut. And so that is something that, sure, in the bubble of Ivorian football, if everyone's in the same context, it is what it is. But then when you're looking to compete on a global stage, even a regional stage, you kind of see some of the impact. Again, to my point of like trying to bring up the bottom of the talent. Well, if even players who are playing at elite level are experiencing that, then that's going to be a challenge. With in terms of like, if we look at facilities, different resources, like obviously football is, as we touched on, one of the first things we said is, football is a business. It is something that everyone loves, the passion, the excitement of the game. It is a business. And to make investments in the facilities and in the field, and even to have like a residence like you guys have, and have nutrition and have all those resources to hopefully put the players in the best position possible. It takes investment, right? And sometimes in football, we get the benefactor who just loves football and has made their riches somewhere and wants to put it into the game. sometimes we're looking, we need a kind of we need to have some kind of revenue coming back in, right? And obviously that mostly within football, it's that selling of players, moving them on to Europe or other bigger leagues within Africa. So what does that look like from like the point of view of Ivoire Academy? You guys said even your first team is mostly 18 and 19. And so the belief, the ethos is that development of players, right? And to move them on. So what does that start to look like when, okay, we see within our team, or, you know, we've got a striker who's ready to make the next step, or we've got our center back is ready, or when you've got those, you know, your top 10, 15% that really are that level, what do those conversations start to look like with the player, with the family? Who are we talking to within football? Is it agents coming to you? Is it directly club to club? Are there other, you know, are there scouts coming from certain clubs? Like, how does that typically start to happen?
So typically, from the player side, it's important to ensure that you keep the family in the loop. The family wants to know because at the time, usually at 17, getting to 18, they know that their son has the potential of becoming a professional football player. So you need to ensure that you keep the family in the loop to let them know, okay, listen, these are the options. This is our plan. And then from then on, it really will depend. So sometimes we have some scouts that come to visit that are interested in certain players. Sometimes as agents directly. Sometimes some of the players get agents, then come and have conversations with us as well. And sometimes it's the clubs directly. So there's not really any set way of doing it. Yeah, it can really just come from anywhere. And then, you know, what ends up happening typically is there'll be trials, and to be able to maximize travel, you know, potentials, because on this part of the world, visas is one of those things that sometimes it's not very easy to get.
Yeah.
You want to ensure that if, for example, they're going to a Spanish club for a trial, potentially maybe let's go and let them see 2 or 3 clubs instead of only one, to give them the best chance to be able to sign one of the clubs as well, because you never know. Maybe the coach will be in a bad mood one day, or the entirety of the week or 10 days that they're on trial. Maybe the kid is feeling homesick and doesn't perform that day or for the 10 days that they're there. So there's a lot of things that you can't control at the end of the day. We try to put our players in the best kinds of environments and the best kinds of situations for them to succeed. But some of these things are rather subjective. So it's just one of those things. And so, yeah, and then from then on, you know, we try to negotiate with whoever is our point of contact to try to make a deal go through. Sometimes it goes through, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. Case in point, we had a couple players recently that went on trial to Dubai, and one of the kids was of interest to this Dubai team, but in the end, we weren't able to make a deal go through. But it's also encouraging also for the players to know that they have some kind of interest from outside, and there's potential for them to go somewhere else. And so it also gives them a little bit of fire in their belly to continue to work hard on a daily basis, because sometimes it gets, you know, monotonous if you're having an academy from, say, age 10, you're there for the last 8 years, just playing, and it gives them kind of like a light at the end of the tunnel, something to try to get to the next level. So yeah, it's always a good thing. It's encouraging. And it's also encouraging for us people who work with our players to be able to know that, okay, yeah, we have done something that's good, and hopefully we'll be able to give them an opportunity to go out there and do something great as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like you're taking them from 10, 12, even 14 years old. And with the goal, you're talking to their families, you're talking to them like, hey, if you hold up your side, which is putting 100% of yourself into this, into training every day, always trying to hit the next level, like we'll guide you, right? And we'll put you in that position. So for you guys as directors and coaches of the club, like being able to create and kind of foster those opportunities is so key, right? To give them that option. you talked about, Spain, you mentioned Dubai, like has I'm curious, like obviously Europe is the first thought and probably like the overarching goal for most players. Hey, I want to go play in like La Liga, so popular in Cote d'Ivoire, or eventually in the Premier League, right? And or in France.
Liga, yeah.
Right. So what are some of the like those markets that you guys typically have connections with? So we think of the bigger European clubs in general, but what are some of those typical destinations, whether it's Western, Central, Eastern Europe, or we're talking about some of the Arab states as well, maybe in Asia. Like what are some of those typical points, or who you guys are usually in contact with?
So being a francophone country, it's much easier to be in alignment with francophone speaking countries. So the main destinations would be a France or even a Belgium. At one point in our history, we were actually affiliated with a club in Belgium where the majority of our players would end up at that club. We're not affiliated with the club anymore, but we still have connections there. So some of our players will end up in Belgium as well. But we also think about it really holistically, because at the end of the day, you don't want to send a player at the age of 18 to somewhere where they're not able to succeed. So if we see it that the player is probably not at the level to be able to play in a Ligue 1 or Ligue 2 in France, then you try to see, okay, maybe they'll thrive from the age of 18 to 20, or even 18 to 90, or 18 to 21, which are really the development stage of a new profession. You're getting into professional training with people who have more experience, you're learning, and you're trying to get as much experience and game time as possible, from the age of 18 to 21. They might end up in a Norway or Sweden or some of those leagues, which one can argue are less competitive, but they also give opportunities to the younger players as well. So I would rather one of my players goes to a Denmark or Norway, and they're able to perform well, get that confidence, score goals, perform well, and then before making a transition to a France or a Belgium or even a Pro League at the end of the day, because you don't want to kill the talent by sending them somewhere where maybe they won't even have the confidence of a coach, because the coach at that level wants to perform, and they want to win games and have a high impact straight away. So it's just one of those things. You need to also think about, what's best for the kid and what's best for them over the course of the career as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because then their success is going to reflect on you as an academy, and the next group of 10, 12-year-olds and their families are aware of that, and they started to see that, and it's certainly part of your, of the club's reputation too. What are those, when we talk about like, trying to figure out a deal or not, like for the average person within football, they might just think, okay, a team from, let's say, Denmark likes one of your players. They come in, they offer you a certain amount of money. You maybe negotiate on that, yes or no. If it meets the threshold that you guys are looking for, you say yes, and we get it done and we go. So is it always just like a sum? Is it a sell-on fee? Is like, what are the different types of transfer deals and the different like sort of types of I guess of deals that can be done within especially with a developing player?
Yeah, with developing players, it's usually a combination of both, ensuring that the transfer fee is market value. You're getting market value for your player, which is something that's subjective at the end of the day. But we also need to ensure that economically it makes sense for us, or financially it makes sense for us, and then also a selling on fee, retaining a certain percentage. So it might be the case that you let a player go for a sum that is a little bit lesser than you would like to, but knowing that you have a higher percentage of a sell-on fee, knowing that the player will probably perform well and then end up being in a bigger league down the line as well. So it's a combination of both of the two things that you mentioned earlier, both the transfer fee and then also the selling fee, and then also ensuring that the player goes to a place where he's also compensated fairly, because certain clubs will come in and want to pay you below market because they believe that, that being from Africa, the player might want to or will be more keen on signing with lower wages. But, we also ensure that, given the country that they're going to, they're able to also, be okay in terms financially. The worst thing is if most of their money is spent in like rent and food,
Right.
etc. So you need to make sure that they're okay, given the fact that there's also probably going to be some kind of financial burden that they'll have on their family that ends up staying back in Africa.
Yeah, exactly. And there's those horror stories as well, mostly associated with these less than reputable like agents and things, where you hear players getting dropped off in a foreign country and they're living in a dorm with 10 other players or something, and there's no support or no resources, and it's like just kind of like a not a great situation for anyone to live in, let alone like a young impressionable person making their first move in a different culture, trying to pursue their dreams professionally. So I'm sure there's a lot to consider there. You mentioned that sometimes it's directly club to club, or a lot of times agents will come and they'll see a player that they like. And I know there's you mentioned one of the first things you wanted to be, other than an investment banker, was a football agent.
Yeah.
Now that you've been in football within a couple of different roles, like where do you see the role, of the agent? I know a lot of times they're an easy scapegoat, and people just say, "Oh, agents are scumbags," or you have to be careful. There's a lot of scams in Africa too, which is like such a plight and a plague going on right now. Again, talking about that desperation and just the dream of being a professional. So it leaves a lot of people exposed and vulnerable. But what would you say is kind of like, being within the industry? What could you share to someone outside, just a casual observer, of like the role of agents, and kind of some of the benefits and maybe some of the challenges that they present to you, as a academy developing players?
Yeah, I mean, agents are a key part of this industry. I would say that a lot of the transfers won't get done without the agents, because a lot of times they'll even work on behalf of the clubs to be able to ensure that a deal gets done at the end of the day. They'll sometimes run in between the buying and the selling club to ensure that a deal gets done. And if done properly, I know a couple agents who do their job really well and they take care of their players. In an African context, a lot of times the agents end up being kind of like a bigger brother or a member of the family that will also help you adapt in a new environment. I know some players, for example, who end up playing in Spain or even in Portugal, didn't speak the language, but their agents were able to help them settle and take care of some of the things that they would have to do, all the admin stuff, so they can be able to focus on performing on the field, because by the performance, they'll get more opportunities by the kinds of performances that they're able to put on the field at the end of the day. And then on the flip side, you have some agents that are just in it for the money. One of my good friends is an agent, and I was asking him, so what's the problem with you agents with selling certain players to clubs that they're not going to perform well, and basically you're there to make money? And he was saying that he doesn't do that, but one of the issues you get also is because of the change of the regulations of being an agent. You can't technically be an agent of a certain player for more than 2 years. So it's basically 2 years, and then it's a renewable thing. So sometimes maybe you will take a player at a younger age, and then when you put them in one environment, their first contract, maybe they won't make that much money. So you as an agent you don't make that much money, but you would have invested in the player to get them to that level.
Right.
And then on the second and the third contract, when it's the big move and it's time for you to also reap some of the rewards from the hard work you put in, then some of the bigger agencies come and take your players. So that's one of the things that leads to some agents deciding, listen, I'm not thinking about the long term, I'm thinking about the short term. Maybe we'll send him to a club in Turkey, and have nothing against clubs in Turkey, but this is just an example where I, as an agent, will make $50,000 if he plays great. If he doesn't, that's just the way it is. So it's just one of those things, and it's very, very important, especially in the African context, to be able to find the right kinds of person that's able to manage the talent properly, and the kind of person, like I said earlier, because football is really mainly based on who you know and on relationships, like a lot of other industries,
Sure.
but it's really exacerbated within football. You need to ensure that you're also with the right kind of agents as well, and not only based on the name, because certain agents are former players, and you think, okay, I used to see him,
Exactly.
score in the 1994 World Cup,
Yeah.
or miss a penalty in the 1994 World Cup, and in the end you think, okay, he can be great agents. That's not true. It's
Totally
the same
different
thing
skill
as,
set, right?
yes,
Yeah.
totally different skill set. Same way you could have been a great player and not a great coach. At the end of the day, it's a totally different skill set, and so you need to do your research as well. Ensure that the agency that you sign with, or the individual agent you sign for, is also in line with what you want to do, and you're able to do part of the journey with the person, and be able to maximize the opportunities you can get within your career.
Yeah. What would you say within your role, a new agent, a new person comes to you, like, what's something you're looking for, like an initial, like, red flag or something that, okay, like this guy might not be somebody that we want to do business with, or to entrust our players to?
Well, it really does. It really depends. I'm not one to judge a book by its cover, but a lot of times you want to do your own background checks, and to ensure, okay, has this person done any deals with anyone that I know, or what's his reputation overall? Because, yeah, maybe you're able to do one or two bad deals, but then quickly enough, people know the kind of person that you have, and your character then ends up coming out and standing out. So that's usually what I end up doing. Seeing if I know other people who have worked with him before, what they say of him, and then also spend time with the person and try to get my own impressions on it at the end of the day. But like, yeah, get your own read. But at the end of the day, you won't know everyone, and sometimes it's just one of those things where you also have to go with your gut feeling, and try to see if a deal makes sense at the end of the day, especially if a player already has an agent that you don't know about. Then it's just one of those things where, kind of your hands are forced, and you have to try to do the best you can, and then also cross your fingers that it's also a good deal. It's a good deal for the kid primarily, because that, at the end of the day, that's what you want them to be able to fulfill their dreams as a professional, and to be able to be in a good environment that's going to also help them push on to the next level.
Yeah, I think this has been a great conversation, John. We appreciate you sharing about, you personally, and then the Ivoire Academy, and football within Cote d'Ivoire, its benefits and challenges. The way that we finish each episode here, if you could finish the sentence, because football.
Because football is the world's passion. Yeah, something like that.
You can add
That'll
on.
have to do.
Yeah. Awesome. It's definitely a true statement. I agree. I think, that's how you and I met a couple of weeks ago, just because of our shared passion for football, and it really brings people together. And we see what this AFCON tournament has done in bringing the whole continent together. The Asian Cup, the same thing is happening right now. We see what it means to so many. So yeah, I would agree, it's the world's passion and mine, and it helps me to connect with other people. So awesome. Well, thank you, John, so much for your time. We're going to link to your LinkedIn. If there's any other things you'd like us to have added for the club or anything like that, we'll put those in the description. So everyone, please make sure you check out the Ivoire Academy. You can get the inside scoop on the next generation of superstars coming out of Cote d'Ivoire. And thank you all for watching the episode. We'll see you on the next one. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more. But yeah, we'll see you on the next episode. And John, thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and we wish you a great day.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.